Great. I had to log out and come back in. Okay, so don't ever install any freeware. It messes up the machine. Okay, so good evening all. We're going to have a look at this Tal Filip game. So this was Moscow 1967. Okay, excellent. Okay, so you're all with me on Chessbase and on live stream. I'm putting the both chat windows next to each other. So we're going to be going on till about 8:15 now because we started late. Sorry about all the technical issues. We're going to get through these games. It's going to be an hour from now. Okay. There's a few interesting games I've picked out of Mikhail Tal, and I'm in a reasonably good mood at the moment. Okay, so E4 was played, and the Caro-Kann from Filip. So we have a very solid, rock solid Caro-Kann. In fact, we have one of the most solid choices ever possible in the Caro-Kann. I don't know what you guys think. Is Bishop F5 or Knight D7 the most solid? A lesser solid but more dynamic continuation would be Knight F6, and you could either take with the G pawn, Larsen's variation where you try and get G file counterplay, or you could take with E takes, which I think Botvinnik or Bronstein might have played. It's a bit more solid than that, and but even more solid is Bishop F5, and then usually you get this, and it carries on, and Black's like occupying just the first three ranks like a little flat pancake. So, and White gets more space, but later Black tries to play C5 and undermine White. But here, Tal's opponent played Knight D7, and I think this has been favoured by Anatoly Karpov a lot. He did well against even Kasparov. So it's used by very solid players to often try and neutralise dynamic players. To have less tactical pressure, to exchange off knights safely. So Mikhail played Knight F3, and after Knight F6 he refused a knight exchange. So he played Knight G3, and now we have E6. So Bishop D3, a developing move, as I was mentioning earlier. If Bishop C4, maybe Knight B6, a tempo game. So a developing move, Bishop E7, now Queen E2. So not yet committing the king to casting on the king side. Is the king potentially going on the queen side? Is White really going to play Bishop D2, castle's queen side? Well, Queen E2 is also a central, control move, putting things, on that centre. C5, and now White does actually decide to castle king side. So he castles king side, and Black castles king side. So the interesting thing now that happens is Rook D1. So Rook D1, okay, the Rook, has got a sort of pressure on the D file. Black took, and now after Knight takes D4, Black played the cautious looking Rook E8. And now, actually, what to do with this bishop? Perhaps not so normal. Perhaps you might think Bishop G5 or something. But actually, Tal weakens a few queenside squares, actually, by playing B3. Notably A3 and C3. But he wants the bishop here, striking across the diagonal. King might be sort of exposed later. So Queen B6, Bishop B2. Now the knight retreats to F8 here. So it looks as though the soft points are all guarded up, adequately. But, we got the Tal bishops pointing down, potentially, at the white king. So what are the Tal bishops going to do in this game? Well, first, actually, Knight F3, getting out of the way of this bishop. So we've got the firing lines open now on the poor black king. So what does Black play here? Bishop D7. This looks like a sort of what a solid, player with either the French or Caro might play, just to put the bishop on C6, not weakening any pawns with A6 or B5, just with this manoeuvre, just putting the bishop centrally seems like a good idea. But Knight E5, in fact the bishop's offered up on a plate after Rook AD8, but no, White wants to keep some pressure going, and now actually this knight ventures out on G3, so Knight G3 is played. So what sort of pressure are we talking about here? I think the first threat might be knight takes, bishop takes, knight takes, attacking the queen, rook takes, and then bishop takes F6, so we have double pawns. So Black wants to avoid that. So knight takes E4. Now we have bishop takes E4. So we've still got some pressure here, pressure points. Okay, so bishop c8, and now the first pressure point is used actually. In fact, f7 is also a pressure point as well as h7. So queen h5 strikes at both f7 and h7 here. So how does black defend this? It's already a bit risky. You can imagine g6, we're just asking for trouble with g6 because look at the dark squares. We could play something like knight g4 here, and if takes, then knight h6 would be mate. So g6 maybe is to be avoided because of knight g4. So in fact, okay, black wants to shield f7 without using perhaps g6. He plays knight g6. So is this all good so far for black? No, because now comes a thunderbolt. Knight takes f7. Bang. The king's drawn out. E6 is slightly more vulnerable because we've removed the the sort of pawn structure base. So king takes f7. We're winning another pawn now, attacking the knight and attacking this. So these bishops are doing a fine job on g7 and g6 now. So how does black defend g7 and g6? One little trick move seems to do the trick. e5. So with e5, the queen's now defending g6, and the bishop's now shielded away from g7. Is it all okay for black now? Not necessarily. Mikhail takes on d8, and after rook takes d8, what does white play to continue the attack? Is the queen stranded? In fact, white is now faced with not rook h8 actually, because bishop takes g6 and then queen takes. That's not a threat that black has. But the queen is out of the action and comes back into the action actually with queen h5. So threats now. What are the threats? Can anyone see? I'm not 100% sure what the threats, the concrete threat is of queen h5. It does mean the queen, maybe free for f3. Also, actually, there's lateral pressure. Actually, having seen this game earlier, I know that this lateral pressure is going to become significant because you can imagine, it being useful in some cases that this pawn actually, believe it or not, you could say, and this might sound ridiculous, but the pawn is sort of in a way pinned if it doesn't want to release protection. Say it ever captured, it would be releasing protection on these squares, particularly d5. If you play a move like queen h5, you might not realise that, with the lateral pressure. But that's actually a key tactical point to bear in mind. So queen e6, and you might think, well, actually, look at this. The queen and king are on a kind of skewer. Imagine, if you had a bishop skewer later for the queen and king, right? Now, what I've just said is also that pawn's kind of virtually pinned in a way. So just bear that in mind. h3 was played, which does sort of nothing except for stopping maybe queen g4. So Tal's playing a bit of a waiting move there, but maybe, just maybe, g4 also is supported, and then bishop f5 might be annoying potentially. Bishop c5 was played, and now actually king h1, another seemingly sort of nothing move. Okay, if bishop f2, of course, rook f1. So black plays bishop d4. And we have, here, basically, Tal's a piece down. Maybe this was just completely unsound. He's a piece down, and it seems to be with very little compensation. He plays rook d1, actually, so he's pinning, that rook, so maybe threatening c3. So black has to parry c3 at least. He plays rook d6. Everything still seems okay now, but there's going to be a disaster, a tactical disaster, very, very shortly, because white played bishop a3 here, attacking the rook, and black really horrifically seemed to blunder because he didn't realise this outrageous concept that actually this pawn, as I say, it's like this pawn is pinned. If it ever moved, it would be revealing squares, particularly d5 is a key square to get access to. So believe it or not, after rook a6, a really crushing move was played by Tal, and I wonder if you can work it out, those on live stream. Those on ChessBase, unfortunately you can see the next move, but it's a great move, isn't it? And it causes a lot of problems. So 10 seconds for those people on live stream if you want to guess, starting from now. And on ChessBase, just have a look further beyond the move. Okay, the thunderbolt now is rook takes d4. Bang. Because look, as I say, that pawn was shielding actually d5. Take it out of the way. If black resigned here, believe it or not, take it out of the way, we've got bishop d5 skewering the poor queen against the king. And even if we play rook takes a3, the rook now means rook, bishop d5 is supported. So with this thunderbolt, black felt compelled to resign. It's a bit sad actually, because he seemed to be doing very well. There doesn't seem to be any significant attack earlier. It seemed that black's e5 almost fended off all the threats. So let's have a look at that again, what happened. So in a seemingly rock solid Caro-Kann, it's as if Tal was just having a bit of fun. He pointed his two bishops at the opponent's king, even fianchettoing the queen's bishop, and then leisurely sort of just an attack with his queen, with queen h5 here. So there was a concept that if g6, we would have had knight g4. So black wanted to avoid that and innocently played knight g6. But we have some exposure and the king brought out. So knight takes f7, king takes f7, queen takes. So a knight just for 2 pawns. And black seems to be adequately defending with e5. He's defending laterally and he's defending against the bishop on g7. But it seems a disaster happens very shortly afterwards anyway. So queen h5, queen e6 is setting up a potentially nasty tactic. But you can't imagine here, because look, the rook's protecting d5, the queen's. How can you imagine the bishop coming to d5 later? It's unimaginable. But this is exactly in effect what happened later. So h3 also stops the queen g4. Now king h1, what is white playing out? Maybe with king h1 he's unpinned the pawn actually, and he's going to play f4. So perhaps some panic set in, because f4, you don't want to take to open up. Well, actually queen takes bishop would be on, and otherwise f5 would be dangerous. So maybe some sort of panic happened here, that the thought of f4 might actually be really quite dangerous. So black seems to play a logical move, bishop d4, but he does go into another pin on the d file. So now there's another potentially ominous threat, c3. Fine, that's parried as well. Now here you could argue, has black, weathered the storm? So this move, bishop a3, and it's amazing that, couldn't black have just played, if he plays rook d7 actually, that might go into bishop f5, a skewer. So what does black do here? Does he go all the way back? Maybe he didn't fancy that. He thought just attack the bishop. And then bang, rook takes d4, changes the picture. So white's just materially winning now, because he already had 2 pawns and he's just won a piece back. And black's king is still exposed and these horrible threats now. And look at this poor bishop still stuck at home. So that was an interesting game. I don't know if there's anything you got from that. So that was just one of the games I wanted to have a look at. Did anyone get anything at all from that? Maybe tactically. Is there any tactical motifs or ideas? There's a lot of pressure and black seemed to crack. So let's go on to the next game. Okay, so another game of Mikhail. Another short game actually. So this is against a player called Sviridov in Stuttgart 1969. So playing white, he plays e4. So we have a Sicilian, very brave choice. None of this boring Caro-Kann stuff. So testing Tal in the Sicilian. I think his win rate is highest in the Sicilian, I suspect. So knight f3, d6, mainline stuff. No chicken, no chicken stuff with bishop b5. He plays d4. Bishop b5 is apparently the second most popular move, actually. So c takes d4, knight takes d4. Okay, knight f6, knight c3. We have the dragon variation, g6. So black in the dragon is weakening these squares, and you normally think the idea is for white, just to exchange off the bishop, hack, mate the king, that sort of thing. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. So bishop g7, f3. So knight c6, all theory, all theory, all theory, all theory. Now here, maybe rook c8 is also another move as well as what was played. Queen a5. Interesting. Queen a5. King moves now to b1. Right. The rook now goes to c8. And Mikhail plays g4. So g4 carries with it maybe almost a positional threat, actually, of chasing away the knight, and then maybe knight d5, and even offering the exchange of queens just to be content, just to be slightly better maybe. Alternatively, you could argue that g4 is a prelude to playing h4, h5, takes g5 maybe later. So two little plans. So black actually was cautious and played quite a committal move, because if he wants to castle kingside, this is going to delay castling kingside. He played h6. He's trying to keep the lines closed, so this would seem to be a very sensible policy again against a very dangerous dynamic player. Why not try and keep the lines closed, play a bit craftily, as wily as a fox, to play h6. How is the h file going to be opened? How is Fischer's expression going to see the light of day of open up the h file, sack and mate? Are we going to see that here? h4, a6. So the queenside counterplay is cheekily going to be created without any of the downsides of the tearing apart of the h file, because black hasn't castled yet. King's still in the centre, so how does Tal exploit this? He plays actually bishop e2. What do we notice? The rooks are now connected with each other. Fantastic. What do we notice about the black rooks? They're not connected. The king is stopping their connection. Does black ever want to make these rooks work together? That's one downside. Or is he just content to use this c4 square? Okay. He's content for the moment to use the c4 square. Knight e5. Now Tal makes an interesting decision. He plays g5. Okay. The interesting thing here is that what does black do actually after this? It would be a bit tricky to play knight h5, probably because of f4, and then bishop takes h5 is going to be nasty. It might be a bit tricky to play knight h7 or g8, but maybe that was best. I don't know. Again, f4 or even knight d5 might be unpleasant, or maybe even h5 could be dangerous for black, because this doesn't look good, this lack of development here, of those two pieces. But black decided in this position to play h takes g5, and the interesting thing is a very powerful Zwischenzug tactic is coming up now after h takes g5, because black played rook takes h1, perhaps expecting the routine, rook takes h1, and then maybe the knight can go here. But instead, Tal offers the whole rook. He takes the knight instead. Fine. He's attacking the bishop, but surely rook takes rook is with check. But now, this is really naughty what happens now, and very, very unexpected. Basically, Tal plays knight takes d1. Actually, he's attacking the queen. So there's no routine capture available because the queen's attacked. So the queen takes on d2, but now, look, the knight is protecting c2. So actually there's no threat of queen c2 here, and white is not compelled to take the queen. The bishop is also protecting d1. White actually instead plays f takes g7. F takes g7, leaving the queen attacked, and this threat of mate with g8. Mate. So black has a lost position here. He resigns here. He's just losing too much material. You know, if king d8, you know, you could just queen check. You could take the rook, and you'd be like, you know, 4 pieces against 2. It'll be 2 pieces up. So black was trying to play like a clever fox, but unfortunately was outwitted anyway. So let's have a look at that again, because black didn't commit to casting kingside, which might seem like a really, really good idea against a player like Tal. You know, don't castle, whatever you do, yeah, because you're making your king a fixed target. But it seems, you know, with tactics, there are other vulnerabilities in the position. Whilst we can say that a weird property of the previous game was a kind of virtual pin in the previous game, we can see that in this game, look, this is actually potentially an unprotected piece. Once knight e5 happens, this is actually an unprotected piece. I don't know, maybe if we make such subtle observations, we can hope to get into these powerful combinations. If we take note of the little clues in the position, that actually after that move knight e5 we have an unprotected piece here. If we look at this in retrospect, would you all agree that a5 is a tactical vulnerability potentially exploitable? Also, you know, white's connected rooks means you know, there's going to be pressure on the h-file, but it was sort of unthinkable what happened here, that the power of the Zwischenzug is demonstrated in this game. The first Zwischenzug was not the routine rook takes h1, it was taking on f6. The second one was even more amazing though, that actually the queen coming in on d2 cannot do any damage in this position, giving white the time not to recapture the queen, but just play f takes g7. So in your games, if you think you've got automatic recaptures, sometimes there's extremely powerful Zwischenzugs, you know, involving pawns, you know, getting, you know, to the 8th rank. So that's that one. So that was game 2. I hope some tactical ideas are emerging so far from these 2 games. So we've got you know, tactical vulnerabilities of all kinds here being demonstrated. So let's go on to another game. Okay, against Alexei Suetin, Olympiads USSR 1969. So e4, and Alexei Suetin played c5, Sicilian, brave enough again. So after knight f3, e6, we have the open Sicilian, but now we have a6, which I believe is called the can variation. Is that correct, everyone? Who's a Sicilian expert, can you just confirm that? This is the Sicilian can. Correct? So the can looks as though it's weakening all the dark squares in the position. That looks to be a downside with these 2 pawn moves here. But actually the e6 means bishop b4 might be annoying, potentially. Also a6 immediately means b5 and maybe bishop b7 could be accelerated. Okay, so bishop d3, not committing the knight to c3. Note, not inviting any pins yet. So knight e7, odd. Looks odd, this move, knight e7. What is this? Well, maybe, you know, knight e7 is just supporting the idea of knight c6, maybe, to try and put pressure on here. So knight c3, knight bc6, without having to recapture with either pawn, seems like a good idea. And now knight g6 anyway. So the knight, is it okay here? One advantage of being here as opposed to here is that maybe e5, is not going to chase it away anyway. It's shielding h7. So Mikhail here castles. He just castles b5. So is black setup clever or silly? What do you guys think so far on live stream? Is the black setup silly with the knight here as opposed to here, and the lack of development, or do you think it's justified so far? Would you play the position as black? Any ideas? Any comments? What do you guys think as I pour a Diet Coke here? No, I haven't got any Diet Coke. No, okay. So what do you guys think? Someone says weak. Okay, Gallic, on live stream. Anyone on chess-based server wants to comment here? Okay, we'll carry on. So bishop e3 seems like a logical move. Bishop e3 can connect the rooks again if queen d2 or queen e2. Toshin writes, generally a knight on b6 or g6 considered bad. Right. So d6, and now we see the move f4. So the problem with the knight on g6, it can still be chased with f5 potentially. Bishop e7. There's another problem revealed now. The knight on f6 would have stopped this next move, queen h5. But on g6, queen h5 is invited. So black, again, like the previous Tal opponent, is not too keen to castle kingside straight away here. He delays it again, bishop f6. So he's ready to pounce to use the e5 square if f5, maybe just knight e5. So Tal actually keeps the tension of playing f5. He plays rook ad1. So when I say keep the tension, f5 might be more effective a bit later. So you can keep f5 as a potential threat going. Play at the most painful point for black. But here actually, black decided to give up the dark square bishop. Black voluntarily plays bishop takes c3 here. Okay, he doubles the pawns, but white has the dangerous bishop pair now. So queen c7, and also look, d6 might be a target on the d file. So rook d2 looks as though maybe doubling, or maybe doubling here. You never know. Maybe the f file or maybe d6 is going to be targeted on the d file. So rook d2, quite a flexible move. Knight ce7. So black looks as though, is he going to play like bishop b7 and maybe cheekily castle queenside? Knight d4. And there might be a slight problem revealed. If black plays the routine bishop b7, maybe, just maybe, check. And knight takes b5 and we're going to win another pawn. Maybe that makes bishop b7 here unattractive because of bishop takes b5 check. And what if, black takes this pawn on c3? It looks as though it should be punishable somehow. Does anyone know how? Queen takes c3. Maybe just f5. There might be something really concrete here, or maybe just again, no, not bishop takes b5 because queen takes e3 is check. No, that's check. But queen takes e3 is on, so I don't think it's that. But anyway, black decided not to take that pawn, didn't want to take the risk. He played bishop d7. So maybe black's still going to try and castle queenside. f5 now. Black takes and then uses the e5 square. So this looks positional. Surely this knight is quite strong on e5. Unfortunately, the dynamics don't favour black because the king's in the centre. This pawn is pinned to the king. Tal plays now knight e6. Oh dear, knight e6. Ouch. So he's forking the queen and g7, so it has to be taken. Takes, and now he's got a lot of pressure on f7. This looks quite bad now. The queen is seemingly attacked with g6, and maybe, you know, black has got the idea that if e takes, then knight takes, and he might be okay. But no, in this position, Tal doesn't give the chance for that. Bang. Actually, I'll test the guys on live stream. 10 seconds, guys. Can you find Tal's next move? 10 seconds for you guys. For you on ChessBase, I'm sorry, unless you can hide the move score. But think about the next move if you don't see the move score. It's an amazing move, so 10 seconds as well, starting from now. Okay? Ready? Any guesses? Queen takes e5. Oh dear, what is going on here? So black took, and now e takes f7, and we realise something basic first, that if the basic thing we realise now is if king f8, unfortunately bishop h6 is mate, so we've got to avoid king f8. Unfortunately, king d7, what happens if king d7? This is interesting, and I should have really engine checked this earlier, actually, because let's examine this. If king d7, I'm not sure bishop takes b5 is the move. What if king e6? Where's the attack now? Where? I can't see it personally. Does anyone? I'm not sure bishop takes b5 is it. I'm checking out bishop f5. Because if king c6, we've now got bishop e4 check. And the king's not escaping to either of these two squares, is it? The bishops are on both those two squares. So knight d5. We can carry on. Carnage time. Bishop takes d5. We're going to start losing lots of material here. Maybe taking a rook with check. I don't know where the king's escaping. If here we're getting loads and loads of material for the queen, too much material. And if here, I mean, it's starting to look pretty bad with bishop g5 here. And then maybe again bishop d5 again. It's just looking quite gruesome, and you can either play f8, or maybe there's even stronger than what I said. So it looks to be the big problem is discovered check. I don't know what you guys think. What do you think is stronger based on the evidence there? Would you say bishop takes b5 check or bishop f5 check? Vote now. So who votes bishop takes b5 check? And who votes bishop f5 check? I haven't engine checked this, but it would be nice for someone to engine check it at some point. f5, b5, f5, 2 votes for f5. On the ChessBase server, 1 vote for bishop f5. So you guys think bishop f5 has got more going for it? I think the basic problem is, what do we do about king e6? Is there a way to win this position? I'm not 100% sure there is there? Because the bishop can't, if bishop d7, black could think about giving up the queen, and he'd be a rook up. So that's not too hot, bishop d7. Doesn't seem to be any other moves here. So I think actually bishop f5 is probably the way to go. So you let the king apparently almost make a run for it on the queen side, but then bishop e4 check. So it forces losing a bit more material, going into another discovered check, and then you can take the rook. So you've won rook and knight, and here you could win another rook. So it's starting to mount up. You know, 2 rooks in the knight is getting to be a big deal. You know, after f8, that's quite a big deal. In fact, you know, this is winning the queen anyway, because where is the king going? There's no b7. So that was wonderful. So we've seen now in these last 2 games that these people that were trying to be clever, wily foxes, not castling, are still getting punished because let's grossly generalise, there's horrible pins lurking in the position that are subtle. They provide a subtle basis for tactics. These horrible pins. This pin is created on you know, f7 potentially once the knight moves, and also of course there's a pin on h7. But once the knight moves, we're creating a pin on f7, and if this knight goes to d4, it's threatening e6. So we've got this pin being celebrated on this diagonal in this game. If we look in retrospect at the mechanics of it, could black have castled? I'm not really sure. If black had castled, he would have probably been slaughtered as well. It looks bad, doesn't it? What would we play here? Couldn't we consider in this position rook f3 to go to h3? It looks pretty nasty. If h6, you just play f5 and bishop takes h6. So maybe, you know, black wasn't that keen to castle here. Maybe this whole knight g6 concept isn't brilliant. Could black have tried to castle queenside? I'm not really sure again. You know, d6 is a problem. You know, maybe sometimes the bishop takes b5 as well. So what black played, I don't know. This rook d2 and then, so knight d4 is a preparation now for f5. And then bang, it starts to get really bad after knight e6. So once we get this potential for a nice queen sack and lots of discovered double checks, that's the end of black. So here or here, end of black. Just all this materials getting gobbled up with all these checks. So that was an interesting game. So we're seeing a few more tactical ideas. So it's interesting so far. I hope you'll agree. So let's go on to another game. So this is against Vrema, Andrei Vrema, Tallinn 1971. Another Sicilian actually. I don't really mean to put everyone off playing the Sicilian defence. It just, if you're playing against a dynamic, aggressive player like Tal or Kasparov or Spassky, you're probably going to lose if you're playing the Sicilian defence as a general rule. But anyway, it's an exciting and fun, you know, position to play the Sicilian. You just have to be aware you're going to be hacked up a lot of the time. So d4. Okay, so mainline Sicilian, but a different variation, knight c6. So how do we handle this breed of Sicilian? What is knight c6 doing? Well, potentially it could have sort of transposed into maybe, you know, Sveshnikov potentially, but actually sorry, I think knight bd, knight b5, d6. This could be an invitation. I don't know. I'm not really up on the theory that much. So knight c3, queen c7 was played. Bishop e3. Black plays a6. Now the light squared bishop interrupts the queen's focus on the centre. Actually, bishop d3 is played. Knight f6, and now Mikhail just castles. So again, he's one queen move away from connecting rooks. Black's lagging development. Black actually plays outrageously in this game. Tries to attack Tal on h2. The cheek of it. He plays bishop d6. Okay. He's a bit fortunate. Knight b5s, they don't seem to work here because the queen, is blocked in by that bishop. So knight b5 is not working. King actually moves, inviting bishop h2. Of course, the bishop would be kind of probably trapped with g3 here. So black doesn't want to do that. He plays actually h5. He carries on as if he's attacking Tal on the king side. So Mikhail plays f4. And black continues aggressively. Knight g4. So we've got a choice here. Do we actually want to move this bishop down here? Still protecting d4, but even so, Mikhail actually plays queen f3. He doesn't mind losing his dark square bishop, it seems, with queen f3. So black has a decision here. Look at his development. His bishop's blocked in. Is he really going to play this at some point? He's got to do something about these pieces, surely. Okay, these pieces are sort of attacking, but he loses now his knight. He gives up to get that dark square bishop, and now he plays queen b6. Just being almost like pedantic, b2 and d4, surely they're a bit weaker. Okay, and also a further problem is we've got a pin on the knight on the queen. So Tal's move is it looking suspect because of this e5 punishing Mikhail? If he moves his knight, he's going to get a queen exchange. Okay. The thing is, he doesn't move his knight here. He offers the knight. He plays queen g3 because look, the king's in the centre. This is undeveloped queen side. These are facts still in the position. So black gobbles up the piece. E takes d4. So what's the punishment now? Queen takes g7. The rook has to move. Okay, what have we got for the knight? e5. So we've got potential after e5 for a knight maneuver coming in, potentially, probing some squares. Or we've got potential for f5, maybe an e6. So the bishop moves. Now f5 actually is the one chosen, because there's also now a threat of f6 maybe. And also knight f4 might be dangerous. Knight takes, knight f6. There's all sorts of threats. Knight d5 to f6. Okay. So black here plays f6. I don't know what you guys would think is a good defensive idea here. Remember, this pawn is blocking the bishop from coming to b7. The queen has to move for the... It's a lot of rigmarole to get developed here on the queen side. So anyway, f6 was chosen. Now knight f4. Ignoring, it seems, black's idea to get this pawn, So black actually attacks the queen, expecting it to move maybe. But no. A surprise move here. Can you guys on live stream guess it? I'll give you 10 seconds. On ChessBase, can you guess it? Without looking. So you might be tempted by a check, though. So Tal didn't play any check. No. Okay. He gives up the queen again. E takes f6. So what is going on here, you might ask? So let's have a look. Black didn't take the queen. Now if he took the queen, I would imagine the move takes here, threatening g8. So say king f7. Have I got this wrong? Can this really be it? I'm not sure actually. Rook takes g7. We must take on g7, surely. Would you all agree that we must take on g7? Yeah? We haven't got time for knight d5, have we? We take on g7. So king f7. So, okay, let's look at this position. We've got some alternatives, like f6 might be dangerous. You know, I can imagine if bishop takes f6, then knight d5. So we're hitting queen and bishop. If queen d8, queen d8? I'm not 100% sure, actually. You know, rook takes f6. I don't know, is it really dangerous? Probably, because now we're threatening rook g6. It looks very dangerous. So maybe this was it. You know, it looks like a raging attack after f6. Can anyone see any better than f6? That would look to be a very strong move here. What about knight h5 instead of d5? Alright, knight takes h5. Good one, Ironmus. Good one. Because we're protecting that pawn then, aren't we? So the threat now is bishop c4 check with g8 still on the cards. Good idea. Right. That's a bust, isn't it? Because now if queen d8, we can play check. Can't we? Or even stronger. There might be even stronger than check. We might just be able to play bishop h7 if we want to win the queen. That might be a good move. Or just rook takes f6. If bishop c4 check here, what about d5? I suppose rook takes f6 is crushing, is it? There's bishop e6 here, no. So I think in this position knight takes h5 looks the strongest. Hope someone can engine check it after. So knight takes h5 looks really strong. I think that's at least getting back the material. You just play rook takes f6 check. Oh, sorry, knight e7, 22 knight e7. So you're saying in this position, knight e7. Isn't rook takes f6 still... No. No, you got a point. Knight e7. Oh dear. Is there a bust for knight e7? No. Instead of queen d8. Sorry, knight h5, knight e7, 23 rook a e1 is being suggested by a couple of people. Rook a e1. So the immediate threat now is rook takes e7, king takes, and then g8. Yes, rook a e1. Wow. So everyone convinced this is totally winning for white now, yeah? This is compelling evidence that it's crushing for white, isn't it? Would everyone agree? Shall we move on to the game continuation? Okay, let's go back. So that's why he didn't take the queen. So knight f4, rook f7. After e takes f6. So black actually maybe saw some of that. He played knight e5. And again, the queen is offered, bishop c4. Offering the bishop as well as the queen. So the bishop is en prise. So it's taken actually. Knight takes c4. But now check. Bishop f8. And now knight takes h5. And here we've got a very dangerous threat, I think, of knight g7 check and queen takes f7. Once the king moves, queen takes f7. So knight d6 at least protects the rook. So the rook's protected. But unfortunately, there's check. And now the pressure's really being put on here by these two pawns, which are acting like attacking sort of pieces in their own right. Mikhail plays rook e7. So there's numerous threats. Principal threat is rook takes f7, knight takes, queen takes f8, and then queen takes f7, getting back loads and loads of material. So black decided here to play queen b5. So this is a bit cheeky. So we're just hitting the rook. So rook f e1 now is still threatening horrible things like rook takes and then queen takes. So queen d5 protects the rook, surely. Has black got away with it? He's protecting the rook now on f7. Is black safe? Mikhail doesn't panic here. Of course. He just attacks the queen, knight f4, just attacking the queen. The queen gobbles a pawn on a2 like one of those old computers. Okay. But now comes another brilliant tactic. So I wonder if you guys on livestream can guess this next brilliant tactic, which might be considered an interruption tactic. So 10 seconds for you guys. On ChessBase, what do you think then, without looking at the score sheet? I wish I could hide the score sheet from you guys. That would be amazing. Then these tests would be a lot better. Okay, it's sort of interrupting the protection with knight e6 check. So it's disrupted. So black actually decided to give up the queen here. He plays queen takes e6. Doesn't really help. After takes, there's too many threats. Rook takes f6. Okay, the rook's attacked with the king attacking the rook. But now just rook f7, another interruption tactic. Because the rook's been interrupted from f8. Because if knight takes f8, we've got queen takes check. And then maybe, even e7, that looks totally convincing. Because of e8 is a major threat. And if knight d6, queen takes f8, it's end of game. So that was a really crushing finish. But what else could... So in this position, if he had taken with d takes e6, what would happen here? I would say rook takes f7, knight takes. We can start mowing black, maybe, takes. We can take another knight if we want. No? And then we can play takes here, and we've got a lot of material. We're coming in with e7. Isn't this enough to win? Well, actually, the e-pawn's pinned to the queen actually here, but still, it looks like a huge position. If the queen just steps away, then f7. Isn't this winning? You say I can hide. How can I hide the score sheet? Not to you guys. Sorry, you guys can hide it. Sorry, but let's go back. Are we convinced with this? Hang on. Is everyone convinced this is winning? Is rook takes f7 the strongest move here? Everyone agree? Is rook takes f7 the strongest move? It looks pretty strong to me, doesn't it? Yeah. I think it's mowing all the pieces back with interest. Yeah. Okay. So all right. Let's review and summary this game. So in the game, so what happened in the game? Well, Black had sort of resigns pretty shortly after that. After Rook F7, I think. So Black kind of resigned here. So let's go in review and summary. So another guy thinking play the Sicilian and not castle as the general sort of idea. Okay, so Bishop E3. In fact, going for White's king almost with H5. So this is also a lesson to you that the H pawn doesn't always win every single game, even in blitz. Sometimes the H pawn doesn't win every game. Sort of fishing pole type attack. He did try and celebrate winning the dark square bishop. Pressure on the dark squares with Queen B6. Problem with Queen B6, the queen side underdeveloped. Yes, bad developments. So we need to sort of emphasize the bad developments. So sacking the knight here, not exchanging queens. Queen G3. So we're emphasizing bad development. And also, what else is being emphasized? Mobile pawns in the center. These two pawns, mobile pawns, coming in very dangerously after F5. So this pawn's protected by the queen against knight E5. And also this very dangerous knight now after knight F4, threatening horrible things like knight D5 and knight H5. Knight D5 attacking the queen, attacking F6. So the eviction of the queen didn't work. Tal simply played E takes F6 for reasons we've sort of touched the surface of. That E takes F6 seems to work. F6 was bad, but what else was Black doing here? In fact, what was Black faced with here? How can Black develop the pieces anyway? Say Queen C5. How do we proceed the attack? We can play F6 here, can't we, to trap the bishop on Queen C5? Or push it back. That'd be horrible, wouldn't it? To get the bishop over there. Then we could just play knight F4 and then we've got Rook A E1. I don't know. This looks pretty bad. If F6 is not played, I don't know what is played. You say Queen takes B2. You want to have a look at Queen takes B2? Ironmus. This might be the move that Tal missed. Queen takes B2. Yeah, this might... What about knight F4, though? Hang on. Knight F4. The knight looks pretty menacing, doesn't it? So B5... I don't think we've got time for this. F6. Say bishop C5. Because we want to try and castle queenside, yeah? Can anyone see a bust here out of interest? Is there a clear win here? Bishop G6. Knight G6. If Black gets two more moves, he's casting queenside. Bishop G6. Say I ignore it. Will you play Bishop takes F7? You're not really playing Bishop F7, are you? I'm not really sure, you know. Queen takes B2. Knight D5 prevents casting. Knight D5. So if Bishop B7 here, oh yeah, Knight C7 check. That might be a really good idea actually, because you're not just winning the rook, If you play f6, again, like there's pressure on here, so this goes over here. It doesn't look that good for black. Yeah, maybe that's a better idea. Okay, okay. Maybe f-file needs to be open, so e6, someone said. Okay, hang on a sec. So in this position, you want to play e6 here, straight off the bat. e6. I'm not really sure, you know, because takes. That's potentially solid for black, surely. What are you going to do here? I'm not sure about e6. I think my preference, personally, for the moment, is knight f4 to go to d5. In fact, in fact, if we want to stop castling queenside, couldn't we play knight f6 check? That's quite dangerous, isn't it? If takes. Anyway, there's lots of possibilities to analyse, but so in the game there was a spectacular continuation. All right, let's look at another game. Yeah. Okay, ready for another game? So, Tal against Bronstein, e4, d6, played by David Bronstein. d4, knight f6. Knight c3, g6. Bishop g5. David Bronstein again, he's not too keen to castle kingside, so a bit of a waiting move, perhaps c6. After knight f3, bishop g7, we see queen d2. Crude idea. Maybe exchange off bishops, maybe, you know, this sort of attack. David plays bishop g4. He's going to counter-attack maybe on d4, you know, maybe play, you know, maybe something like this. Castles. He evicts the bishop. Back. Black is in no hurry to castle. Familiar story. Black plays b5. Okay. Mikhail plays bishop d3. And you notice one advantage recurring from Mikhail's players white. Doesn't panic just because black hasn't castled. He's connecting his rooks a lot of the time. Controlling the central, you know, squares. And in fact, rook d e1, as if he's going to break with e5 now. So knight fd7, he does actually play e5. Black wants to keep the position closed. So that's why he probably didn't really calculate too much d takes. You know, with his rooks like this, his lack of development, he wants to keep the position closed. So he plays d5. Okay. But there's some tactical vulnerabilities here. Knight h4. And there seems to be a horrible threat of e6 and then g6. It's all collapsing. So c5 is played. But actually, sorry, e6 is covered by bishop takes e6. But Mikhail plays knight takes g6. Knight sack for 2 pawns. Which is a common thing I've noticed actually in games of Tal. A knight for 2 pawns is nothing. You know, the knights, they can be sacrificed for 2 pawns. Most of the time you're going to win if you're Mikhail Tal. So, takes 2 pawns, king's exposed. Rooks are not going to be connected. Note the rooks are not going to be connected for quite a while. 3 pawns, knight takes d5. A lot of pawns for the knight. Knight c6. The bishop's attacked now. Goes back. Again the bishop's attacked with knight f4. So attacking the bishop. Bishop goes back again. We've got a lot of pawns, but we want to get to the king. So queen d3. immediate threat now of queen f5 check. That has to be stopped. e6 stops queen f5. Another threat, forcing move, queen e4, hitting the knight now. The knight goes away. We've got loads of pawns. We can be quite casual about this. Mikhail just plays rook d1. You know, black's pieces are very tied up here. Unpleasant. Queen b8. Okay. Knight h5. Pressure on black's position. g7 being targeted. Knight d5. And a nasty tactic is about to happen here. Just winning very, very quickly. D takes c5 is winning yet another pawn, which cannot go unpunished, really. Black tries to recapture a pawn with his queen, but unfortunately, there's just a simple move which is, you know, black's overloaded. He's threatening actually queen takes b2 check here. Bishop d4 is backfiring that on g7 bishop. Check. But f4, and f4 is actually protected by the knight. The queen's protecting this bishop, and this is now threatening bishop g7. So David is getting overloaded. He resigns here, but what if he tried to protect with, you know, he's still losing the bishop g7. So it's just a horrible game, basically. Mikhail, even you could say he had enough material for the knight sack quite quickly, actually, after the knight sack. Yeah, that was quite brutal, wasn't it? So there wasn't anything too spectacular in that one, except maybe you might think an unusual feature of this game is knight h4 takes g6, because that does leave a lot of problems for black. What could black have done in here anyway? If he can't really castle here, can he? Because h3 and then you just play f4 and your attack's ready made. You know, you got the knight support for f5. So it looked horrendous from the start, this position. It looked completely enough. 3 pawns. 3 pawns. Black's piece is all tied down. And then he sort of exerts more central pressure. So queen e4 and then rook d1, exerting more central pressure. And this knight h5 is pretty good, actually. It's starting to overload the black position. It's just completely overloaded position. Knight h5 also introduces the idea of queen f4 check, by the way, because the bishop's stopping king e8, so queen f4 is a major threat as well. So knight d5 actually stops queen f4. Okay, so black's position was pretty desperate, but this was a real crusher, this bishop d4 here. So there'd be a Zwischenzug check. You know, if queen takes, you play the check, and then you take here. So horrible. So check, f4, end of game. So I hope from these games you've got something from them. So far in the live stream we've done 1 hour 10 minutes. Does anyone want to have a look at another game, or shall we call it a day now until next week? Actually, there seems to be quite a few of you still around. I don't know if it's because of Mikhail Tal, but do you want to have a look at one more game, or should we carry on next week? Okay, I'll just do one last game. Just one. I'm going over my allocation. No, actually, sorry, I can't. I've just realised someone is scheduled after me. It will be kind of rude because I'm just crashing into someone else's schedule. So I think we should really carry on next week. Sorry about the late start with the technical issues. But we might carry on with Mikhail next week, so don't worry. So tune in next week, and hopefully I'll have less technical issues at the start. So I hope you enjoyed it this week. Okay. Thanks very much. It will be uploaded to YouTube, this session, if you want to look at it all on stored in the room at the Chessbase server Play Chess. So you can have a look at youtube.com Kingscrusher soon for this video. Okay, and leave comments or questions on the video on YouTube if you want. Okay, so until next week, thanks very much.